snagged.
There's a couple.
The form cards, so you could
Narrative.
Out of executive
Go
session
fix this
here at
flat.
6:19,
Yeah.
with no
Yeah,
motions
practice.
made.
They love that. I know. She's really.
Well, we can do that
And
Members of the public,
But I'll
how do you
try
do
this
this?
for her
Thank you.
to see. Yeah,
The vocabulary sentence.
that's great. We just finished
Elisa.
the Wild Robot. It was-
Members of the public, are you here to share anything?
Not at the moment. I just
Not
want to
at the
listen.
moment. Okay.
closely. Yeah.
Members of the faculty, I see Patty here. Patty, is there anything you'd like to share?
No.
Okay. We're rolling for the budget. So, when last we left, last time we had a budget discussion for the folks that weren't here, we simply were taking it all in based on what was before us. We had no numbers in front of us. We had no idea CLA, equalized pupil, all that stuff. But what we did learn between that meeting and this meeting is that the state has a windfall of cash that they're going to use to buy down the tax rate at some point to the tune of something like 20 cents, I think, Dan, is that correct?
Well, if they put it all toward that, it really depends on what they do with it. Even today, there's talk about, different ways to deal with it. But if it were all just put toward educational spending, it would reduce it. And I don't know, did you use that 20-cent reduction, Wayne? So
No, we can Lori can
Okay,
speak more about that.
I guess we'll get into the actuals later, but the other thing is we're not going to get the CLA for a while, but just as a reminder, our CLA was 105 last year, and that reduced us greatly. But Forrest said don't bank on that for this year. It's been 97 or 100 in the past, at least for the last 6 years I've been on the board. So my assumption is it's going to go down to 100, which will then see an increase in the tax rate. With that, I think questions are on my agenda here. What numbers are available? What do we have right now? We don't have the equalized pupils, I'm assuming.
That's correct.
But we do have this news about the 90 million, and CLA we don't have. Is there anything else we're waiting on?
Equalized people in CLA are the two major ones to come out. There's some other figures like the career center numbers and that type of thing, which will change the expenses and revenues, but I haven't seen those either, not dramatically. They won't change dramatically. So that's pretty much it
Okay.
as far as creating a tax rate.
I know that our buddy Mark Schauber feels today after the task force draft report that nothing will happen between now and next year. He just feels like there's just way too much pandemonium there. So I think we probably stuck with the weights we've got. The 90 million helps, but that's his feeling as of today, and I have to agree with him, seeing all that they're going through.
Absolutely.
And Dan and I both wrote a representative asking for different things. Did you see my email today?
I did, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Dan asked for a buy down of the Act 173 money, the $800,000 that we're going to be hit with when special ed costs come through. And I asked for a change in the weighting to then affect the overweighted districts to ease them as their tax rates go up, but we would see immediate relief from that. So.
And Mark tonight is VSBA meets, and he's lobbying VSBA to push for a moratorium. That's not the right word. Putting Act 173 off for a year. Now, I think that's probably impossible with all of the money that's all gone into that. But he's going to ask VSBA to advocate for that.
Bill?
Just two clarifying points. When you quote the 800,000, that is correct. That's how much year over year went up. But the impact of the Act 173 change in fiscal is 386,000.
Okay.
So there's still going to be a 414,000. That is the need of students. But the 386 is a simple change in the. So it's just important to remember that amount of money.
Okay.
And then to follow up on what Dan said.
But that's year over year too. That's every year we're gonna.
Exactly. I was
Absolutely.
just about to say that's year one.
That's year one.
And then
You're gonna keep coming.
it'll continue.
We're gonna keep running a school.
In our
It's gonna have
meeting
students.
with the legislators from Windham County, they, to a person, were very adamant that they could not see where Act 173 could be implemented this year.
Really? So even though we've all got it embedded in our budgets and everything, it may not go through this year then?
Yes.
Well,
Well, remember, Dan, and again, I guess I'll applaud the WCSU, we're
Oh,
just
we're-
well ahead of
Yeah.
everybody.
We're doing it.
Yeah.
The difference will just be that 386.
Yeah, we would still
And
get.
we're not gonna change anything
Yeah,
operationally,
right,
we're not
yeah.
changing anything what we're doing, we're just
Yeah.
talking about the 386. And luckily, you guys have a director of finance who anticipated that could have been possible and made sure that both funding systems were allocated so that it could be switched if necessary.
Nonetheless, when we look at this budget tonight, we're assuming that we will be complying with Act 173 for the coming year, for
That is correct.
fiscal
That is correct.
2022. Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
And I was just gonna follow up, if it doesn't happen, then that would create more of a fund balance at Wyndham Central to carry when it does happen, so,
I wouldn't change the strategy.
right.
Yeah.
And I did a bad job, I need to apologize for Lori, but last meeting, I should have had everybody ask you questions up front, and then we could have let you go. So I'll try and be more mindful of that, so you can get back on the road, especially since it's snowing out. So just
Worries.
everybody, if you have your Lori questions, let's try and front load those, and then maybe we'll let her go at some point if we're gonna go long. But with that, I'm gonna turn over, Wayne's got a presentation for us that we're gonna walk through, and we'll see if there's been any changes from the last meeting.
Yeah, there's some changes, but before we get into it, I thought I would, in the presentation on the last slide, I'm always gonna keep this because we throw around CLA, yield,
Yes, I actually saw
rent
that.
per pupil cost, everything like that. I just wanted to give you definitions for each of those so that you know what they mean. The yield is essentially the amount of budget divided by the number of students in Vermont. And that's the number that really affects our tax rate the most. CLA is common level appraisal. That's how much our houses are selling for comparative to other towns, and then they make an adjustment based upon that to try to make that equitable for every town. Excess spending threshold, you'll hear that a little bit tonight, and what that is, the state puts a number on what you should not, a number that if you go beyond that, if you spend that beyond that for each child in your district, they double the taxes for you, which we have done that for 2 years in a row.
Can I pause you on that one?
Yeah.
That's a moratorium for 2 years, why would we talk about it tonight?
Well, it's a
Because
concept.
that's what we're talking about, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it won't affect us next year, but it's still gonna be in the law essentially.
Yeah, I
that's
think,
true.
yeah, I think it's gotta stay there until it's gone. The per pupil cost is really how much it costs each child. And then when we bring up equalized pupil, it's really important because, and this is in regards to the weighting study as well too, there's a piece there, is that the AOE considers, when it comes to funding the school, that a preschool student is only 46/100ths of a person, as opposed to a K-6 of one student, as opposed to.
Do you feel that way, Patty?
Such a low state.
As opposed
And our
to-
ratios are up higher, so we
Yeah.
actually take more.
As opposed to 6+, sixth grade, middle school and high school. I think it's 1.15, is that
1.3,
1.3?
1.13.
Oh, 1.13.
They eat that.
And so that's just another factor that plays into this very large complicated formula that then spits out a tax rate that we end up paying. So please, if we start using CLA, yield, all those things, just here's a definition and we can stop.
So, because you're here, Laurie, I saw that the yield had gone up to well over $12,000. Is that because we submitted higher budgets or because there are fewer kids?
No, it's because of the $90 million that's the surplus in the ed fund.
That's
So the
their way
JFO
of-
looks at the ed fund, and I haven't submitted anything to the AOE yet,
Yeah.
so they look at the ed fund and determine what they need to keep, they need a 5% reserve, and so where are they gonna set that yield? So when we were first talking, at the first budget meeting, I was using, an $11,000 yield, which is reasonable, and what it's been, it varies. I've seen it go as low as 9,700, and this is the highest I've ever seen it, and it's because of the 90 million.
So we could thoroughly anticipate that it's only high because of that 90 million, and next year it'll go back down to the 11s or whatever.
That is
So-
correct.
Got it, okay.
That's
Yeah,
the
right,
part that makes
okay.
me nervous.
Yeah, that's, I
exactly.
think,
Yeah.
so getting into tonight, what we're presenting to you is the same budget that we presented to you last time. There's no changes, there's no differences. We'll get into some additions in a minute. But the current tax rate on that budget is $1.84, which,
I thought it
Which
was
is-
well over 2, you said last time.
right, but that
That's the
yield-
power of the yield.
The yield.
That's the yield.
Power of the
The power
yield.
of the yield.
So this is the conservative rate for the yield. So it could potentially go up, it could potentially go down, but this number is conservative, and we're looking at $1.84.
That is utilizing 45 of the 90 million.
To raise the yield,
Yes.
essentially, allowing
So
people
it's
to
important when
spend.
you lobby for the use of that money, that anything less than
That or
45 changes the yield.
Right.
Well, equity would change this way lower.
Well, yeah.
So, anyway, that's more than good enough.
Yeah, and we've already discussed that, you know, we do not know our equalized pupil for next year. We're using last year's equalized pupil. However, we are a school that is, in a town that's growing in numbers of students, so I feel pretty good that it may go up a couple students, which will then reduce the tax rate even further. Again, like we said, we're using 100% for common level appraisal. We're not using last year's anomaly, which is 105, and we did talk about, Lori and I talked about that it has been in that 97, 99% range. The common level appraisal will make a couple cents difference, unless it goes up to 105, then it makes 7 cents of a difference, but I think we're in a pretty good spot there. And then, you know, then the last part is that we are over the excess spending threshold by almost $4,000, $3,775. What that means is that we're not being taxed on that money this year because of you know, the work that you've all done at the state and other districts have. So that we don't have a penalty. Now, you know, like what you just said, Dan, a minute ago, it's still there. It could come back for FY24, but here we are today. And so between not being taxed double on excess spending threshold, having an extremely high yield because of that extra funding from the state, we're looking at $1.84. To give you just a perspective of if the yield was what we had projected at $11,000, when we did not get our excess spending threshold, we were looking at $260. So the idea that last time I came and said, you know, and Lori and I said, you know, I knew it was going to be over 2, and we didn't want to bring that number because it was well over 2. But getting this information has really changed the landscape of our budgeting. So that's to start out with.
Wayne, can I ask you what what our per pupil is that's 3,700 above the spending threshold? Are we in $18,000-$19,000?
We're at about 23.
23.
Yeah, the excess spending threshold just short of $20,000.
Is that higher than it's been?
Yeah, it
That seems really
actually-
high.
Right.
Was it 18?
Last year it went up $36 and then this year it's, you know, over $1,000 it's gone up, so.
Guess
And
I'm
I-
not hallucinating.
Yeah, yeah.
You're not.
That is hot.
And then, you know, I really only have 3 slides here tonight, and I also have the tax rate spreadsheet that we can play numbers with as well too, if you wanted to take a look at that. So the next slide really is just some small adjustments that some of them we talked about last time, and some of them you know, I think when $1.84 came, I was like, okay, I can look at a couple other options and a couple other additions. They're not much, but we did talk about increasing Spanish. So adding point, you know, or 13/100ths of an FTE to Spanish. And I did talk to Gail, and you know, Gail's excited to get as much. Gail's the, you know, Spanish teacher. She's excited to get as much as she can and teach as much Spanish as she can. So that worked very well for her. I'm recommending that we increase her half a day, and then just give a little bit more time so that she can attend Monday meetings. One of the things that we did this year is that we're just giving a little bit more FTEs so that many more folks can join our Monday meetings. They've gone from classroom teachers only to paraprofessionals, specials. It's gone, you know, which leads to about 20 folks having our staff meetings, which I think really helps because we're getting different views from different people, and we're also building up that community as well too. We're getting it. We're finding that it's really hard to keep the building clean with one person. It just is. And the addition of the mobile classroom means 2 more classrooms. And so a half-time custodian, which is what we just added, and it's really made a big difference. And I'm recommending that for next year as well too. And then just a little bit of money on laughter stipends to make sure that if teachers want to do a program, they can do a program after school, and we budgeted for it. So right now, Liz is doing the Chronicle, which is our newspaper. Jesselyn's doing floor hockey. I'd like to keep those options open moving forward. So it's not much. And then just Lori has been, as you see, been talking to Kayla. We're looking at really hard numbers for our bus leases. So we're not really. We're actually leasing 2 buses because our first lease is up. So it's not like we're adding 1 lease, but we're still holding on to the second lease as well. That being said, we're looking at a couple cents for all these items.
Have you got any numbers on that? Because we got a really good deal the first time, but we were never sure whether that would materialize again, so.
Yeah, Kayla and I are meeting next week, and I'll probably reach out between now and then to the Mercedes people and see what gives, but yeah, you got a very good rate.
When you said a couple cents, Wayne, you mean a couple cents to the tax rate?
Yeah, a couple cents on the tax rate.
Okay, so then like $1, whatever, 2.
$1.86, but yeah.
Okay, few additions to supply lines, the nurse's couch. Okay. Anything else? Yeah.
So I want to advocate, as I have been promising that I would all along, for music and art. And I know that scheduling is a problem, and I can recognize that, but I guess I would like to see us put some money in the budget that would allow us, if the right person comes along and things fall into place, we would have the money to do that. And I think that this town has a long history of wanting to see music and art be a really vibrant part of it. So I guess I would say I don't have a proposal for even how to go about it, except that I would like to see that money in there, maybe similar to what just happened with Spanish. Maybe not even quite as big an increase, but whatever music and art currently has, put enough more money in there that, a person comes along and says, let me do all school sing. I'll do it 5 days a week, and I'll do it for $2,000 or whatever. We'd have the money to do that. I hate to see them slip away, and I know that last year we had to cut a lot of things in order to try to get our tax rate down. But so that's my pitch. I would like to see that put back in just simply as a dollar figure or penny figure or whatever it turns out in. And the scheduling, I don't know how to deal with that, but I also think that music, art, foreign language is such a crucial thing that I hate to see it always be taking a back seat to I know what you're passionate about, the math and science, Wayne, and getting those, and getting the days not so chaotic. I can understand all of that, but I also think, the arts in our youth is such a crucial thing as well.
I'd like to add on to what Dan had to say, simply by just first a reminder that this is a COVID budget that we're building for this year at least. So I totally agree with your sentiment, Dan, but I do think that we just had 2 meetings ago Wayne telling us that he's just trying to get kids to remember how to share and how to connect with people, and I think that is important, and I think that disrupting schedules for the, at the expense of that probably is what we want to do next year. Second note is, I had a good talk with Wayne and Lauren Poster when we were stuffing envelopes at their appeal, and I would love to see, as my pitch, to see you guys pick back up the arts integration at some point when we're out of COVID and everybody feels safe to do it. But to me, you're going to get probably more bang for your buck if Jamie's working directly in the classrooms with teachers and they're doing art as part of their learning, and it's built into the academics,
Mhm.
as opposed to just taking them out, putting them in an art room and saying, here's some clay, or whatever. So, what's that?
Yes, it's so rich when she's in the classroom.
So if we're gonna invest in art, I wanna do it in a different way, but I still I think it'll be richer. And I think that there was a lot of vibrancy before COVID on that Arts Integration Council, and I'd like to see that come back at some point. And I don't know how to do that in the budget. I'm sure you do for next year, if you're thinking about it, but that's my one comment on that. You,
I know that you've done this, maybe I forget where, but I know in, doing my own budget for the new fiscal year that it being a COVID budget, there are additional expenses associated with that you just kind of have to do it, or people just cancel. They'll be like, it's too hard, I don't want to, and then you cancel. And a lot of those community-based things, and apropos of the arts, some of the school-based functions that we've lost, I'm not suggesting we overwhelm people who just can't handle it, but I am wanting to ask, like, what about the winter concert or an arts kind of, is any of that, where are you in that? Kind of bringing back some of the community, gathering things, and obviously you're following the health department, but to the extent that sometimes it's like, well, it's going to cost more, we need twice as much space, or we need 2 buses, or I don't even know. Where are you and where are we in terms of bringing back those traditions?
Can I? Yeah. So I have two questions, because I'd like to respond a little bit to you, Dan, as well too, because thinking back to the conversation that we had about time, one of the things that I thought about with specials, it wasn't so much a taking away, it was a replacing, and the replacing felt at the time that we were replacing some of the specials times with science, which wasn't happening because of scheduling, with math, with ELA. We were replacing those because it just wasn't happening because of the specials. I think the other piece that I hear you, because I have another question afterwards too, is that when I first started here 4 years ago, art was 0.2, and we're looking at 0.6 next year.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That music was 0.2, and next year we're looking at 0.7.
Mm-hmm.
That PE was 0.2, and now we're at 0.6. Library and tech were 1.0, actually 0.8. Right now library is 0.5, and then we have technology, that other piece from the WCSU. Spanish was under 0.3, and we're looking at 0.33 for next year. Now some of that is because we have preschool, and we don't have 76 students like we had when I first started here. We have 101. And so I think when I looked to see our specials programs, I think that there's quite a bit happening. Art is now an hour long, as opposed to 45 minutes in one day. Instruments now is you get a lesson during the day, and then we have band now 2 times a week after school, and about 15 kids are taking that. So that's a significant improvement that I felt like wasn't working before. And obviously PE, we were not in compliance. We were doing 1 day a week, now we're doing 2. So I think when I look at this, and I'm thinking of the strings program.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that we did reduce, and we reduced that for grades 1 through 3 because those were the grades that did it, and then for students that wanted to continue it, that they had that option to be able to do it. And part of the reason why that is no longer here is scheduling. I'll be honest with you about that. It was particularly difficult in 3rd grade because 3rd grade went off and 4th grade had to stay back, and so there was that sort of dead time for 4th grade. And the other piece was the person,
Mm-hmm.
and we've had some amazing instructors in the past, and if one of them showed up today, we would be having strings next year. So I think I think we're doing a pretty good job.
Mm-hmm.
And then the arts integration piece, which is why Jamie's here, which we've talked about doing the project, and Patty can talk about that as too. Jamie's been in your class quite a bit. That I think is what Doug already brought up was our best bang for our buck. There's grants out there for that. There's special projects. I mean, there's a science poster contest coming up that I'd like to do. There's things like that. So I'm just sharing that. Hopefully it doesn't come across as defensive or anything like that, but just to really highlight where we are and just thinking about your ideas as well about how we can increase our specials and just do it better. And what I mean by better is that kids are still getting all that they need, and this is just really improving the quality of what they're already doing in the classroom.
I think they already are doing it better than they were. Like, you have done a really great job of restructuring it so they are getting it better and it's more consistent. Partnered with, they're getting consistent math, ELA, social studies, and science instruction every day in the classroom. You know, it's like it's happening rather than it being so compartmentalized because the schedule is so wonkadoodle. And it's setting our kids up, you know, as they leave here and they step foot into BUHS or Putney School or wherever they land, you know, feeling like they're better grounded because they have had a stronger base of the core classes rather than focusing 100% of their time on the specials. Music and art are specials. You know, those are extracurriculars that can happen outside of school as well. You know, so our job is to focus on, I see it anyway, our job is to focus on giving our kids a strong foundation. They're strong readers. We have a lot of kids in the school that love to read. You know, so we're doing a really good job. We're getting there. So I think that, you know, focusing down the road on some projects that Jamie can do is, yes, a better bang for our buck, but I would like to continue to see us focusing on the core content stuff because I think that gives our kids a much better solid footing in life as they move beyond here.
I'd like to say too that I think probably because of the time and the lack of connection of like a performance, an art show, we're not seeing that. But the way I see my kids talking about school, Jamie is really there. Jamie is like a big part as opposed to a couple of years ago. So when they're talking about a lot of things going on in the classroom, like I'm really happy to hear that they've connected with her and like they're seeing projects in this arts integration way. But like, yeah, unfortunately we're not able to like see a performance. So that to me might just be part of what we're lacking. And a lot of parents are feeling that way too. But when you talk to your kid, I can just say my kids are really, they're thinking in a way that I'm happy about. I'm happy about the way Jamie and even Elizabeth are integrating into the classroom. So yeah.
I also want to say, because I feel like I haven't seen science, you know, with my kids a lot in the school, but now I have slime mold in my kitchen and I've never had that before. And it's amazing, and my kids are really engaged with it. It's the first thing they've brought home that I can recall that wasn't a finished project that we're both doing together and talking about and looking things up and adding oats to it. It's pretty cool to have that kind of engagement or see them engage like that in science, which wasn't happening. So, any other comments on arts or specials?
Can I just say one other thing too? Is that I feel like I didn't do a good job also communicating all of this to you. So thanks. Hopefully that just brings some of the highlights that we're doing as well, because you're bringing those up because you're passionate about these specials. And I'm very much as well too, but I wasn't communicating how it's evolved and changed and impacted our school. So.
And just reading off the numbers, I certainly appreciate that. I hadn't paid close attention to the amount of both art and music that there is and PE that there is. So thanks for just sharing the numbers.
Do you think it's worthwhile? You know, we always do footnotes and as part of our budget write-up for the town report. Do you think that's something that's worthwhile to like flag and say?
Yeah. Look at what this was a couple years ago.
These things are, we're not seeing them in the community because of COVID, but like these things really are happening and they're rich.
So this is a footnote in the budget that just simply says that, a literal footnote? Or this is something that's presented?
You could do a footnote, like you could highlight things within the actual budget for numbers, or we could put it as part of the narrative, or both. I mean.
So Jeremy, when somebody looks at the budget at town meeting, they look at the column of percent increases. Sometimes money just moves from one area to another, and we have to explain that. but sometimes there's an increase, it's a large increase,
Yeah.
or a decrease, and it's like, why did you defund this, or why did you add to that? We just say, well, let's get ahead of those questions, let's footnote it, so
Yeah,
later
that
on.
sounds great.
Later in January, somebody will be tracking all that, and we'll make Peter note it so that we can just kind of file it into the town report, which reminds me that you've got to talk to the auditors, because January 8th is way too early for anything.
You know, oh, man.
Unread.
It used to be the 20th, then it was the 15th, now it's the 8th, Dan.
You know,
Can you
I
tell
can tell you
Gail
why
to
they
give
do
us a
that.
break?
If they don't scare the bejesus out of people, they don't see stuff like last year. There were a
Kill 'em.
number of things that didn't get into the town report because they never got submitted at all. So all they're doing is trying to light a fire under people's butts. And evidently it's
I know
working because look, everybody's
she probably
freaking out.
listened to me more than you, I know that, but like, killing me.
I'm gonna leave it the way it is because you know what? That's between you and her.
Can I move on to Jude's question real quick?
Oh, yeah, please.
Yeah, was it a question?
Yes.
Yes.
So you're right, Jude. That I think one of the things that spurred out of one of our local education council meetings was that students were actually feeling the loss of this, and they shared that with us as well, which led to the harvest lunch. With the twist that we wouldn't get all together. But yeah, we are talking about it, and we're trying to figure out ways of doing that. I think as much as we have these very high levels of COVID-19 cases, we're also having kids more vaccinated, and we're also feeling like the risk reward of having the rewards are getting bigger, as opposed to the risk because we just need to have them because of what you're saying, Lisa, as well, is that you don't know what's happening here, and I'm one of the few parents that does know what's happening, and we've got to try to change that a little bit.
Yeah.
And not a little bit, quite a bit.
That's a really,
Yeah.
I'm so glad you said that, because you can't unknow what you know. So it's like if you're in the circle, you know, and you can't unknow that. You can't understand the experience of if you did not have any of that, if there was the absence of all of that. So it is really important.
Do we have planned a learning fair? I know we really haven't hashed that out, but that's for the springtime, so that's a community open to anyone to come in.
I kind of feel like that's awesome. And I think this year is tough and you guys are figuring it out. So I really am trying to think of next year. And if there are ways that with the budget, we have, I don't know, but I would urge that, because, I know we need to plan as if we're gonna be able to be together again. So is there any expenses to those kinds of things that end up in the budget? They're just free. They're just, all of it is free. Yeah,
It's a risk.
it is a risk.
That's what it is. It's a risk.
Yeah.
And-
Free is getting canceled.
And I think it's really, we have probably better partners now up at the college for
I
winter
hope so.
concerts and music and things like
I
that.
hope
So
so.
I think that's something to think about as well.
Yeah,
Is there
okay.
some sort of online way to see the kids perform the music? Like, is that, that I'm sure is a cost because it's extra time for
Yeah,
the music
teachers
teacher.
can't do
But
that, right.
I know a lot of schools in the area have done things like that, either like a Zoom concert of some kind, just to make it safe, of course, and see. So I didn't know if that was part of it.
Yeah, it's definitely been talked about.
Sure.
I'll say
Yeah.
that for sure. And the teachers miss it too. Music, you practice and you practice and you practice to actually play for an audience.
Yeah,
You don't
the
practice just to
performance,
practice.
yeah. Mhm.
So that piece is really
It's a
missing
big
right
thing.
now, and so we're trying to figure out some ways to make sure that they perform, because we don't even have all schools sing, which now that we have a band that's growing, they can't even perform for all schools sing. It's So we are talking about that. I think we're seeing a little bit beyond tomorrow, which is really nice. Like the learning fair, we're planning on having that in some
That's great.
capacity. We're
Good.
planning on March having the art show that we've had at the Marlboro Community Center. We have been discussing either Zoom concerts or recording concerts and throwing them up on Seesaw. Things like that. So we are talking about those things because I feel like we have a little bit of energy to get there now. So
Doug, if I could just jump back to something Selena said, I really think that that the numbers that Wayne was quoting should be included in the narrative, not just as a footnote on the side there, but something that school directors and maybe the principals' reports can just make mention of and just even embrace and put forward, because you know, if people are feeling like I was, like these things have just been filtered away and just, you know, gradually shoveled under the rug, they need to know that that's not really true and that we need to show how that's happening. So let's all work together to remember to make that be a paragraph in the reports.
I think also for town report, if it could be possible, the specialist teachers do provide, like, at least at report card time, what's going on. I can't see why you can't add that as an addendum to the principal's report and the auditor's report. Just saying, here's special report out.
We're just gonna balance it the way Selena was saying. Like, the point is not to overemphasize.
Yeah, just make sure
One thing.
it's
The point
understood
is-
that it didn't go
Yeah,
away.
it's actually fairly
It
robust.
just goes to what you're saying about being in the know. I mean,
Yeah.
in the past, there was people here that were here forever and everyone knew them.
Yeah.
And now those folks have retired,
Yeah.
you know, and Dan hasn't had kids in the school in a really long time. 'cause he's
Really
had-
long time.
But there are a lot of, there are those same taxpayers out there who are like, too many specials. And if we just overemphasize, it's like
Yeah.
a good balance, like
Yeah.
you're saying, we got all this other stuff, we got the regular daily science, we got the regular daily math, we got all that, and look, our specials are together. So, speaking to both constituencies, sorry, there's a
Do you
drawer
mind if I
here.
just, I'm sorry, Jeremy, I just want to be mindful of Lori's time, and I know we've kind of gone off on a tangent here. Is there other, like, money-specific questions that we want to ask of Lori? Sorry,
We wanna
Jeremy, I don't
play
know,
with the
maybe your
budget.
question was moneyed.
I think we should move to what Wayne said, was pull up that budget document, and everybody can spitball their ideas for things, and I have a few I'd like to do with Lori, which is, can we see this budget with like a school improvement, a capital improvement in it, and what does that do? How does it affect the rate and excess spending threshold? My understanding is that it doesn't go into the excess spending threshold and it's outside of it, so it won't be treated as educational resources for kids, right? It won't be counted as educating a student, it's counted as something totally outside of it.
It's an exclusion.
Okay.
The principal and the interest is an exclusion. So, you know, if your principal and interest is $250,000, that's divided by your equalized pupil, and that number comes off of the penalty. So it reduces the penalty, and in some cases could wipe out the penalty. So your cost per student will still stay high, you know, like it is now, 23,000 plus, but you won't be double taxed on
Okay.
that penalty.
And so if you add that, can you add that into this one and see what it would do if we had, I think we had talked about 150,000
No,
a year.
It's $50,000 per year per $1 million. And we have three proposals. One of them is about $6 million for the college, the festival. One is about $10 million for the renovation here and $11 million for a whole new building at a different site.
So that's probably
3.5 and 550.
Yeah, you gotta start with at least 300,000
Yeah,
per
so
year.
if you, so what I did, so Lori, just, I did put this box in, this blue box, so if you put in
For the college, 11
300,000, it
10 million for
automatically
here, and
adds
11 million for a new
to your total,
site.
and then it gives you the tax rate.
$2. So it'd go up 15 cents pretty much from where we're at.
Without a penalty.
Without a penalty. And our cost per pupil would
Goes up
be
6,000.
6,000 over the excess spending threshold, 6,000 times 134, we'd still have to pay.
Would still be penalty.
There'd still be a penalty.
Without the CLA, or sorry, without the yield, it would have been at 260, we'd be at 275.
216.
216, okay.
Yes.
Okay, I thought you said 260.
I'm sorry.
You said 260.
Well,
Yeah.
260, I would have never presented that budget. I would have just, would have said we all just as
That's
to
what
go.
I thought you said
Yeah.
too.
I'm sorry.
He
I
did
probably
say
said-
260.
I probably said
That's like-
260, and it's on record, so.
I'm gonna watch the videotape.
216. I'm
So,
sorry.
okay, so that's
Okay.
my one question. I do have others, but I'm gonna let anybody else ask theirs about numbers. Lori,
I would drop the yield to 11,000.
Yeah.
and see what that does?
Yeah.
I don't think you want to,
Probably don't want to see it, but you probably need to see it.
Well,
Well, because it might
We need
change,
to see it
that's
because-
probably more realistic for next year, yeah?
It is not.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's if
By
you're
it.
planning,
okay.
like, do you
Wayne
do a
needs to
bigger
know
increase
how
for
we react
next
to
year and
that.
then bump it down?
No,
What's,
no,
like,
this
what's
is-
the strategy there?
Well,
Okay. There you go.
definitely getting your taxpayers used to a higher tax rate this year would be probably a strategy that I would recommend. You have to remember also that there's, you'll have to do a lot of explaining at town meeting because last year's tax rate was artificially low as
So,
well,
yeah.
right?
Right.
Because they did away with the penalty. So that was $1.60, what was it here? I have it at the bottom.
64, I believe.
Yeah, $1.60, oh yeah.
But the
Something's
year
changing
before
up.
that, it had been $2, I think, right?
It was a one, just under
It was like
$2 the year
$1.90
before.
something.
About 99 something. So we just, yes, we just had a dip is all we had, but nonetheless, they're gonna need some talking to.
Context, right.
Now,
Especially with the way things are.
this is like 2 to 3 years down the road, but it's coming, right? We have to think about the school and the building. And we think at the same time, parallelly, the equity probably will go through, and we can hope for the best, but that would have been a 40-cent tax rate negative. So this
Reduction.
would bring us down to maybe $2 if we got the equity thing through.
I wouldn't count on the equity being 1 year, though. So I imagine that they'll do it over a period of time.
5 years.
5 years is what we're hearing, so you won't see that dramatic drop.
It'll be a 5-year phase-in to get it, and it'll be a 5-year phase-in to pay it.
No. See, I thought
You won't even notice it. At the end of the
Right.
day, you won't
Yeah.
notice it.
Yeah, it might be 5 cents a year.
Yeah.
But would there be a moratorium on excess spending during that
Yes.
time? I would think they
Both
should
of
do
those
that, so.
things will happen.
Yeah.
I think they're already talking about how bad of an idea the excess spending was, and it's really not.
That has
It's doing more
unanimous
harm than
support
the good that it is.
during the transition not to occur.
So Wayne, what would that $2.50 look like if there were no excess spending there? Is that,
That is without excess spending.
no excess spending? Okay, yeah.
And so that's $2.50, that's the scenario in which we have the most control over. It is on this site with the renovation of this building at a $10 million bill, essentially,
Oh, right.
renovation.
Right.
At 20 years. We're looking at $2.50 with a proposed yield of $11,000.
Take a breath, Wayne.
Well, and just type the 6 million in just for, I mean, we know what it's gonna do. It's gonna reduce that by.
You want it, so the 6 million was 134, I
Was
believe.
it? Yeah, yeah,
136.
yeah, okay, yeah. About 15 cents different.
So it's, long-term, that's actually a significant amount of money. Because, that's 15 cents forever.
Per year,
But
15 years.
when I look at that, and I think about the school and what a banging school it's gonna be, it's not that shocking, actually. Like, if we have what the architects are planning,
Basically.
and the capacity, and maybe we have more students.
Well,
I mean, you all are in the camp of there's gonna be an increase over a 10-year period. I don't know, I'm not in that camp yet.
I am in that camp because I feel like we are at the population that we are now with the largest institution vacant. That I have a lot of trust that the folks that are running it right now are going to fill it.
Yep.
And when they fill it, people need to come to work there. And those people will increase just like we have right now. We've lost some students because Marlboro College is no longer here, but we have a lot of students because Marlboro College was here too. So I have a lot of faith in that. I also believe, and there's been some articles out recently, that there is going to be, because of climate change, there's going to be folks that are going to have to move north. And we're going to be a state that has space to take folks in, and we're already seeing that now. So I do believe that, and yeah, Jeremy?
Well, just plus pandemic. I mean, I understand that there's been some up and down because people, the vaccine came out, but just, I know more stuff about Dover, but I mean, there's still going to be the city folks that can work remote, it's still going to trend in our direction as well, so.
Yeah, folks are working home because companies realize that renting out office space is a lot of money, and some folks are now working from home. The other piece that I'm just going to throw out, and maybe Bill and Lori agree or disagree, I think that if think of the worst case scenario for FY24. We're talking about FY23 right now, but FY24 the following year. If they went down to an 11-cent yield and just said, and they put on the excess spending threshold, if they did that, there would be chaos.
Mhm.
There really would be, and I don't think anybody at the state level would allow that type of chaos, especially with the high need for us to not only bring in high quality teachers, but to actually hold on to them. In the state, there's a lot of pieces that I think that as much as I see the almost 13 now, and then maybe thinking back to 11, I hope they're not thinking that, just because of the education system in Vermont, that it's not going to be that much of a drop next year, because that would be chaos if we were to go from 13 to 11 in 1 year again and add the excess spending threshold. I mean, we essentially would have to gut the whole school or pay a large sum of money, which is not good for anybody. So they've got to be thinking, just like we are today, thinking 2-3 years down the road through this process. So that's just my general sense. I don't know.
As long as we're spitballing numbers, you have included in there the entire cost of us picking up Act 173. But what is Marlboro's portion of that 385,000? That if we don't implement
18.6%.
of 385, so
It's really not that significant. They're talking 60,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, but still, that's an entire,
That's 2 cents. That
There's
would
a
be
couple
2
cents, yeah, so that's not gonna make that much difference.
Well, but we say that, but that is,
Yeah, they're only 13%.
that could be an extra pair in a classroom.
Yeah,
13%?
yeah.
That
You're
could
only
be greater.
13% of that budget.
13% of 385.
Yeah, but the $27,000, which is what a cent costs roughly at this point, is a significant amount of money.
Yeah, yeah.
And that is, so if it did go through and we had this extra, it's a really nice place to be, honestly. So,
Well, I guess my point was, are we gonna keep that in the budget? I guess we kinda need to, because we have no idea whether they're gonna,
Yeah, man.
We gotta
That
keep it
only
in there.
benefits you.
Yeah.
And it gets worse.
yeah. Well, if we knew it was going away, we could simply remove that from the budget that we're asking the voters to approve.
Well, but it's not going to go away forever.
Yeah.
It might be delayed.
Yeah.
But it's not going away. And so you don't want to
We're just
get
talking
rid
about
of.
next year, though, but,
Yeah, but we have to think 3 to 5 years down the road, even though we have these numbers in front of us. I mean, being strategic, so that way it's less of an impact year to year, because you don't want to keep doing this.
Right.
You want to, here it will be, we're just going to cruise. Because it's less of a shock for taxpayers, and it keeps our budget more stable.
Yeah, so just scenario-wise, if you just imagine that you guys are contemplating a 20-year payment, and there's going to be volatility in the next 2 or 3 years, with, over the next 7 years, more than likely, a weighting study that's going to be implemented that really is going to allow you to have all your operational costs be flat. That's really going to absorb your operational costs, all your things that naturally go up. So if you think on a 5 to 7 year plane, giving your taxpayers a $1.86, which Wayne has presented tonight, $1.84 plus the 2 cents on the one sheet, and a leap to $2.30 or $2.40 is really where I think your brain might want to consider going, because you may want to just literally start being, we're at 2, we're at 212, we're at 224, we're at 236, and you're going to get to a point where you're going to, if more students come, then you're going to be able to minimize that. But I think you have to be unbelievably transparent that you're making a $6 to a $12 million investment
Right.
for the town.
Right.
That's going to cost. And you're trying to do it strategically instead of
Right.
bumping.
Right.
So I think there's a lot of story to be told so that your constituents understand why you're making the decisions you're making.
I just have probably a stupid question, but how do you make the leap without the bond? Right? So we're at 184 now. We're probably not gonna, maybe we'll go to bond. I don't think we're gonna go to bond next year, but maybe
Well,
we'll
so
get
for
there.
example, if you have an expected high school population of 49, but we believe in the vision that we're gonna get more people coming, we may want to budget for 65. And if those 65 come, great job. We are ready to pay that tuition. And if they're not, great. That rolls into a surplus that the town can have an article on your town meeting to allow that to go into a reserve, to allow for this conversation to happen year over year with those assets for the town to be spread over a smoothing period of 5 to 7 years.
It's basically taking the concept of what we've done with MTSS and the federal money, right? It's the same concept, right, that we're building, and so that it smooths out that increase over the time that Act 173 is going to be implemented.
But when is the state gonna say no to surpluses? Isn't that coming?
Well, not if they're moved into a reserve. They can't really, do much if the
That's why it has to be voted on.
Right, if the voters
have to approve it,
approve money to be, a surplus to be moved into a reserve account for, future tuition or operational or whatever, then I don't believe they have a leg to stand on. If it's sitting in your general fund,
Yes.
sure they do.
That's problematic.
Sure they do.
Now, Dan and I have always looked at what other towns have done for transportation and how we're always way lower than others. And while you're here, Lori, can you tell us maybe just by looking how much lower we are than other towns in terms of transportation costs?
Of your transportation costs?
Yeah, we feel like other towns are like at 100,000 and we are never there.
Well, we are actually at 100,000.
We are?
Yeah, you are.
Did we do that last year?
But and other districts have done this too by adding bus monitors and things like that. Our transportation has gone up quite a bit every year for good reasons. A lot of it has to do with buses don't last this long anymore. I'll be honest, like you're not going to get a bus to drive 10 years anymore. You're going to get it to 6. So we're buying more buses. That's a really big piece of it. So that's so that you have that piece. I think it's really important also to make sure that we're paying employees equitable rates, which we're doing now as well too. So we're closer to what other districts are paying. However, the service that we get is far superior to anything else. I talk with the bus coordinator frequently. It's just a very different relationship. We're doing winter sports, just like Dover, because Dover has their buses too, because it's really easy for us because we have our buses. So that we get a much better service and we're paying a little less for it.
We don't have the architect in this, do we, this budget?
We do, we have $30,000.
Yeah.
That's not hand go up.
Yeah, I thought that was in there, but I was wondering how many high school students we have in there as a cushion, and I think Lori's point is a good one. I don't know how many you have built in, or...
No, I don't, because
Let's
last time
put a
we-
few in, let's pack a few in there.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. No, I to be honest,
Well, I brought an extra one in this
Well,
year.
Good, there you go.
but I think it's important to do that, just because I think it's good to be safe, and now that we have a rate that can allow us to be safe, be conservative, I think that's it. The other piece that we can also think too is that purchase that we can make that won't be next year. So staffing wouldn't be something, we would want to keep the staffing year to year. But if we want to make large purchases with this extra money, we can look into that. We also have the ESSER 3 funds coming that Lori and I have already talked about purchasing things with that as well too.
Well, I think we were at $1.99. We went extremely low down to $1.63. I think that bringing it up to, so we don't have to have these stressful conversations around buses all the time, every year it comes up.
Yeah.
Should we
Yeah.
put some more money in there? And if we use it, we use it, but if not, Wayne doesn't have to come back to us and ask for funds, and he could talk to Kayla and make the right decisions with us.
And I think, as I understand it, we don't have transportation yet anyway, because we don't really know what's gonna happen with the buses for next year. So we've got a number in there, but it's not.
Exactly, yeah, I think I put, I think the first lease is about 13, almost 14,000, and then the next one, I think I put 20,000 in there.
Yeah.
Like that, so.
So just, because I think adding high school students is really important. If we, say for example, we bought a bus, that's what the tax rate would go up to, $1.80, $1.90. What's that, Laurie?
Would you just add that, because I think there might be a calculation thing with your box, just add it to that top, number 3, just do a, click on number 3, row 3. Yeah,
Add 85,000 to that?
Yeah.
Thanks for making me do it.
yeah.
I'm gonna estimate that.
I think a narrative does exist, Bill, for the high school, just simply because we had $129,000.
Oh, I think it's true. I'm just saying
Yeah.
that is a
Yeah.
mechanism
Yeah.
that is transparent, is honest, that plays both ways.
And there have been plenty of years when we get
I
partway
did
through
put
the
it in the
year
formula.
and we didn't have enough money budgeted, and all of a sudden we're $100,000 short because people moved into town with high school kids. So better to
I
be
think
safe
that's
than
going to
sorry.
have to be an ongoing strategy for Marlboro until you see a trend. I think you're seeing a trend of those increases.
What was the thing called? Do you want to, and put the 12,000 back in?
Which 12,000?
I
The
guess
yield.
this-
We're both working on this, so I think it might be
Yeah, I got the
figuring you
yield
out.
back
Oh,
in.
okay.
I got the yield back in, and then if you add 85,000, it goes up 4 cents
For
a bus.
buying a brand new bus.
For buying a brand new bus.
And is there any talk, it's sort of out of the realm of school board stuff
I
here,
took it
but
out.
we could buy that bus also. I can't remember what the numbers are. I'm sure you and Kayla have talked about that, but we could own that bus too, I think.
Yes, right, that's what I want to talk to her about, and
Yeah.
probably I'll get with Mercedes and ask them what the buyout price
I
is.
mean, it is a nice addition to where even if we don't use it, it goes in the reserve, we know we're gonna need a new bus at some point. So I think that that's one area. And then, Bill, to your point about tuition, I had kind of a follow-up question on technology. Like, I think maybe this is more towards you, maybe it's to Wayne, but, you know, we do see the increases in technology. Is that a transfer cost? Because we used to have Rochelle doing tech. Explain to me what
You're
that's about.
basically buying into a pool of technology service. So you
Okay.
used to just provide it yourself, and now you're buying into a pool. So it's kind of like getting insurance yourself or buying into an insurance pool. And so, for example, we do the same thing with specialists, so counselors or social emotional learning, things of that nature. But certain schools also decide to have their own independent investments in that. So you can have the pool, you can not be a part of the pool. There's some things you have to be a part of the pool on because you have back office stuff that is universal.
Yeah, like email stuff.
But you can always, some schools choose to augment that kind of foundation for their specific community.
I know that this is sort of our first leap into the pool, but are we gonna see increases every year in technology?
Well, can I respond to that as well? The increase this year is really due to the fact that Marlboro really wasn't paying their real portion of the combined software and different items that are basically split by ADM. So Power School, e-finance, well, e-finance is free actually, which it should be.
We can get paid to have it.
I
I got a
know.
little Game of Thrones here. The Lannister always pays his debts. Marlboro always pays his debts. So you're saying we weren't paying?
I was saying,
You weren't charged for it.
Bullshit.
You weren't charged
You
for
We didn't
it
use it.
accurately.
Oh,
Well,
you
are
use it.
using
You
it.
have to.
yeah.
Power School?
Power
Oh, you have
School, Frontline, there's a lot of different software packages that are used for all districts. And so I had to readjust.
The substitute management system, the professional development management system, the student information system, all of those are universal.
Right.
And
We just
during our
didn't have
discussion
really
of Act
parent
173
integration, I
and
guess.
socialization, we had
Which
to
other districts do.
because it was all parceled out in
Other
different little
schools
things. So that was kind of a reestablishment of the base. I
Right, and
guess.
that's the significant increase this year, is really taking all of that into consideration. So the way I did the technology budget this year was I took the staffing, which Peter says you get 0.5 person, I think it is, I have to look at that. So I split the staffing up differently by district, but then I took all the rest of the costs, the hardware, the software, and all of that and split it by ADM. So it was a readjustment this year for that, which I didn't really get a chance to explain at the WCSU meeting because we really didn't talk about that budget.
But to your question, once that base is set,
Correct.
you should expect that to rise just like you would salaries. If the principals come back and say, we need a higher level of service, we're using more technology, and we need to hire another person, then that person goes into the budget, and you guys are going to pay 13% of that.
And we did reduce the budget by $9,000 for computers that was in the local budget because that'll come out of WCSU's budget now. So there was a little bit of offset to that increase.
Wayne, could you, for the people at home, pull up the classroom FTEs chart that's been updated since the last meeting?
Yeah, happy to.
That's a good one to look at because, you know, last time we looked at it, it only had 2 columns, but now Wayne's actually put in what's in the school alongside what's proposed.
Yeah.
And you can see that we're not really adding anything, and if we're doing anything, we're actually taking somebody away. There's an assistant that's gone in kindergarten, which my guess is, you know, that might come back. I don't know. We might see an influx of kids where we need it. That sometimes happens.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't think she's teetering on need of it like, you know, Pam was last year. And then the science teacher, that's a big one. But if we're going to invest, I mean, that's a narrative of investing in science, which wasn't being invested in. I do question, I want kind of Bill's opinion on the decision for a full-time, because, you know, we went from having 2 people in the 7th and 8th grade to having 4 people technically now.
So we talked about not being able to hire.
It's a strategic
someone.
decision.
Yeah.
I would say that in my conversations with Wayne and looking at the amount of physical teaching, you need a minimum of 0.67, minimum. And that's if that person's just teaching. Probably not a lot of extra planning time, and probably, as we talked about earlier with arts integration, probably 0 integration beyond just the teaching of the class. So that's one factor. And then the other factor is exactly what Jude just said, that you're going to get a less amount of quality candidates when you only offer a 0.67 position for the type of position that is almost universally full-time. So if you are an art teacher, PE teacher, and you are used to cobbling together, that can work because you have a pool of people that are used to that work. There is not a pool of people that want to be a 0.67 kindergarten teacher, or a 0.67 science teacher, or a 0.67 ELA teacher. So that's just kind of a strategic fact. And so yes, you could have a 0.7 in there and go for it, but you more than likely are putting yourself at a market disadvantage for who you would require.
And I think there's a third part too, which adds to the narrative of this is middle school investment, because I think that a lot of people have written me out of random things saying like, is there going to be a discussion about closing the middle school? And so to me, that is telling them that that's not happening.
No, this is a beautiful, I mean, I think it's a phenomenal investment. And when you actually look at the, let's just say the 0.3, you're talking less than a penny for that 0.3 to ensure the 1.0. Because you're talking maybe 18,000 bucks out of the 27,000 for a penny. So you're talking 2/3 of a penny. So let's work with the 2/3, right? You can go 2/3 for the teacher, or you can add 2/3 of a penny and get the full-time teacher. And then then the imagination goes wild, because then you talk about integration of art and integration of science throughout the building rather than just teaching the course of science.
Okay.
So
Unless we're getting a free science teacher this year.
Yeah.
We're not paying you extra to do 2 jobs. I mean, let's be honest here. Like, we're getting a free science teacher this year.
Very good point.
Yeah, just you know, now that I've been here for a little while, I can remember back to when I started too, which was for the middle school, and we'll just call that the old 5-6 and junior high. We had 3 teachers, and we had assistants in those classes, and there were 76 students. Now we have over 100, and we have the same staffing.
Mm-hmm.
So we pretty much have the same staffing with 101 students at this school, except for preschool. We've added a teacher and an assistant. So that actually has been when you look at it all, per pupil, we've actually still, with this budget, have a reduction, a small reduction, but a small reduction in our FTEs for teachers compared to what we had 4 years ago. So.
With a 33% increase in population.
Yeah, so so we have that. And, you know, just getting back to what Bill said too, and what you were saying too, is when it keeps going in my head, which is something that I think about a lot, is that I think having 7th and 8th grade here is the right thing to do. I would hate to have them leave. Actually, it's like my bag. I love middle school kids. And as Jude pointed out, and you just pointed out, that they also wanted it to be better. And this is a way that we feel like we're able to make it better, is that we're having teachers teaching to their passions, teaching to their strengths, and we're creating more of an environment that students have to have more agency, because they have to move from class to class, they have to learn how to use a supported study block. We've created a block within the day that now students who need additional interventions and additional academic supports are not being pulled out of their general ed classrooms. They're being pulled out of the supported study block because everybody needs a time during the day to be able to work on things in school. So I really took that seriously, and I'm hoping that, you know, this being the first year, Jesselyn, Liz, and myself are really happy with what we're doing, even though it's been a bit of a rocky road. We started a new program in one of the most difficult teaching years. I think this is a great investment for the future, and I'm really looking forward to being able to have this science teacher that's going to be able to open up a lot of doors that I simply can't, but I obviously also really very much enjoy too.
Bill, I think now's a good time to bring it up. We're not going to talk about it tonight, but I think it's just good for you guys to think about. We're going to talk about it at the next regular board meeting, but there's a proposal on the table to have kids within the SU travel around and go to different schools. Now, at the last executive committee meeting, I said to put it on the agenda for December 16th, but let's say, you know, there's going to be a cap. There would be a cap. What is it, 5%?
I think there'll be a minimum of 5% out and 10% in.
Okay.
But the board will have the authority if they want to raise that.
Okay.
But everybody will have a minimum.
So if somebody in Dover wants to come to Marlboro, they could, you know, if they're within a cap, they would apply in March, so you'd have a lot of notice. We would have a lot of notice whether somebody's coming. But Bill brought the point of, we're the only people in the SU that have a middle school other than Leland and Craig, right? So if somebody comes in primary or 3rd and 4th, and they like it, and they want to stay, then they kind of convert into a tuition student, so that money comes to us, which could support a broader middle school program. And so that's why I feel like when Wayne 3 to 4 meetings ago said we should probably start talking to Dover and Wardsboro about our middle school program and what they like to see, that might be something we need to do soon. But anyway, food for thought. Next meeting, we're going to vote on it if we want to be part of it or not.
Free switch.
Other questions for Lori before we let her go? We're at 7:30 here.
They get to
So, oh, I did want to ask if I could just get some clarification for the next draft. That would be great.
For the
For
next.
That's on my mind. We have lost some action items, right?
What's that?
Action items, clarification, like what do you want us to?
What do you want to see in the next draft for the 16th?
Oh, I'll open it up to you guys.
Well, I mean, a couple of things that we were talking about, making sure that high school students is well covered. And I don't know what the cushion that's built in there now is, but it should be more probably.
There is no cushion.
No question.
There was none at all.
None.
Yeah,
Well,
I think
we're
that's a
looking at
mistake, so yeah,
Yeah.
at least a few more for that.
Do you want to shoot for a tax rate? So, for example, if you add $285,000 to this budget based on the yield the way it is and the 100% CLA, that gets you to $2 straight.
I say 190, but that's just me for this year, but, because we're going from 163 to 190.
But 2 years ago, you're still going down.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if we take last year out, because last year
Right, we
was
were at $1.99.
Anomaly.
That was with excess spending, which could be coming
Sure.
back.
Yeah.
We were at 199 because we had a $200,000 excess spending. It's insane.
Well, I sort of don't want to just
Oh,
throw
yeah, the year
money
before
back
that.
in, Lori, just say 285,000. I think we should target it towards something. If we can rationalize the target, I think transportation's gonna go up by 20 or 30,000. You've got, just the one bus lease in there, but there are gonna be other expenses. And the high school kid cushion, those are two, but I wouldn't just simply add money back in to try to get to a higher tax rate. That doesn't seem like something we can defend.
I mean, I know people are thinking about that $1.99, but Dan and I think, and Selena, we were like hat in hand, like begging. We were really worried about what was going to happen when we shot up that high. And I feel like, I don't know, going back to that quickly is going to be concerning. I think getting there, sure, maybe next year we're at $2 or $2.20 or whatever.
But if I just push back a little bit, how hard was it actually? Like, I know you guys were really worried about it, and I'm really asking, like, at the end of the day, did you feel like, man, we just got beat up for that?
No,
Or what,
it wasn't
what
that
was
bad. It wasn't that bad.
But don't-
Yes, we were very nervous, and we did a lot of work to communicate about it. We had special meetings, and we put out a very, very detailed report, and we're very present at pre-town meeting. It was also a different landscape too, because it was actual town meeting, whereas this will be Australian ballot, and so it'll be different. So that work that we did, a couple of years ago, will be just as important, because we won't have a town meeting to be able to have a conversation.
And I don't think it's just that either, Jude. It's not just putting this in front of the town and getting the vote on it, but, Dan and I do a lot of legislative work and write these people and try and get things like the moratorium on the excess spending threshold. And we got it for 2 years. But that's the kind of work that really needs to go in to make change. And to commit to that, I don't know, there's a lot of promises that were made at that meeting, which was we're going to be fighting the equity thing, we're going to be doing, and it's not like we can't just say that and not do it and follow through. So it's a lot of work.
But I think, sorry, go ahead, sir.
I just want to be clear, so the Australian ballot, the speculation is that more people would vote their first impulse or might vote negatively about it than if you were in a situation where you could actually debate it or actually explain things. Is that?
It's just it's an absence of dialogue, right?
Yeah, right.
So
I'm just
it's
making sure I understood what you were saying.
Yeah.
So it seems to me that it's just very hard to, I had the same question as Jude, but it's very hard to know without some sort of data. I don't know how you produce that data. It's just very hard to know what people think about it. And so I would, maybe.
Oh, no.
Yeah, unless there's some sort of data, I would just be wary of the feelings part. I think it's a pretty strong argument to say it was this, it went down, and if it provides for what we need, and our job, if I'm understanding it correctly, our job is primarily to get us what we need.
I do worry. I know, Jude, you said the last meeting, taxes go up, they go up, but the conversations I've been hearing, at least on the equity level for the towns that have really been hit by this stuff, is that you're going to start looking at a different town. I think if we get to the 220s, 230s, you're going to be looking at different people in this town, and that's something I just don't like to swallow. I don't like to price people out of their homes.
Absolutely.
And price people out of their schools. I want to be a town that people come here because they're buying the school. I don't want that to be what we are, and I want to consider
than
that.
we are.
I don't want to consider that.
Yeah.
And there are people that, it's going to be a huge shock to them.
So for next time, responding to that, for next time, because I don't know how we can do it right now, we've got to figure out a way to get some data on that exact thing so that we're not just talking about our feelings about numbers. And I know people are,
you're
so because it's it's just a big unknown. I don't know how we can do that for this budget, but we got to figure out a way next year or whatever to have some sort of poll or some sort of open conversation ahead of time, especially if things are loosened. So.
Can I just, I'm just going to add something to this too?
Yeah.
I see the tax rate that, because we are all very fair and we're all very thoughtful, that when Lori says $2, I see that as a fairness in that when I saw this budget and I saw $1.84, that actually would cause me more stress than not, because I knew instantly that it was a phony number. It's inflated for various reasons. So in many ways, that tax rate really needs to be strategic for the following year. And so if we do one-time purchases that help us out in the future, if we pay off our modular classroom next year, we pay 2 years of leasing, so the next year we don't have to pay for that. If we make sure that we are not gonna get ourselves in hot water with high school students, that's a great thing. If we buy a bus, so then we don't have 3 or 4 or 5 years of leasing the years to come. Like, I think those are things that when I look at the $1.84, that's what it says to me is let's invest in this year, knowing that we won't have those expenses next year, just in case they come back with 11,000 for a yield, because that we will be at 210 just to keep the doors open.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I see it as not so much the number is the reality of the situation. And what I love about this budget is that this is our program. There is no excess, and it's a very solid program that we're providing for our students. Because when we left last time, we didn't discuss it because we said we didn't want to take anything out. This is our program. And so that's the picture that I see from here as I've thought about this, and as Laura brought that in, because that's what the first thing I went to. I was like, okay, we got to think about the following year. So that I just wanted to just bring that into piece. I don't know, I can sort of read all your numbers a little bit as to what tax rate you have, but I'm thinking for next year, the following year, and how can we plan for this gift, essentially?
Yeah.
Because this is a gift. This is not going to happen again. So how can we use that to set us up for the future?
Yeah, I feel like we do need to do, I mean, $1.99 always sounds better to people than $2, which is ridiculous, because what did you say, a penny is like $27,000? Like, it's not a lot. But I feel like if we aim for that, because then the following year, if it's at 205 or 210, then it's not as huge of a sticker shock. And like you just said, if we really just stick with what we had, $1.84, $1.86 is our program. And we're trying to take advantage and think 5 years down the road to plan out for, investing in land, maybe investing in, paying off a mobile classroom or a bus or, the renovation project. Like, I really feel like putting money aside for the renovation and future bond that will happen, regardless of where it happens, it will happen. It has to happen.
Yeah.
So that's not even like debatable anymore. Like, we have to start planning ahead for that. And if we do it this year, it feels really smart. So that way we're not waiting, because we've talked about the renovation for so long, and it's always been like, well, we don't have money in the budget. We don't have money. Well, so now let's stop talking about it and actually put money in the budget. So when we are ready, we're ready to just rock and roll.
Yeah, so there's another one there. So we have $30,000 for architecture, but that could certainly be boosted up as well, because we haven't really been using their services other than just to think about things. But, by the time Marlboro Music Festival gets going with what they're going to do, they have said by next September they would be starting to look at things, and then we would be able to say, okay, well, are we going that way? Are we not going that way? During the year that we're budgeting for right now, we could spend more than $30,000. So it might be another place to really put money in there. I would opt for a number halfway in between where we are and $2. So I'm a little higher than Doug. I'm a little lower than Selena. I would say $1.93 3/4. That's kind of, I don't know. We're throwing out numbers here. That would add something like 120, 150,000 into it.
I'm just thinking of next year. So if with the numbers that you were playing with, when the yield went down to 11,000, which is more on par with what it went up to what, 230 something? So if we were looking at,
it was 230 something with the bond. It was 216. This year's budget would be at 216 without the excess and at 11,000.
without adding the stuff, right?
It's the budget that we looked at last time.
Okay.
Was
So-
216.
No addition.
No additions, but if we're thinking long-term to get some of that, even if we put like a larger amount of money in this year to take advantage of the high yield, for the bond, and then we, cut that in half for next year, but we're still putting money aside, it's gonna be less. I'm just trying to think thinking long-term, Lori, like if you can come up with some like spitball numbers between the two of you to kind of like map that out. Of course, nobody has a crystal ball, but you have many years of expertise to be like, this is typically what the yield is.
Right.
Just to kind of like give us, like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I do.
Bill.
I think that, you know,
Oh,
I'm sorry.
Go.
I think it's important to look back a little bit and look
Yeah.
at the tax rates, and so that it shows that anomaly. And I also think it's good to look forward and say, you know, if this is the operational budget right here, and without all the extra, and then you add, you know, 3% of your, whatever you're adding, your normal costs, where does that keep your tax rate going at a steady yield? And so people can get an idea.
Can you automatically put money into reserves and have the town vote on it? Because that would be better than putting it in the budget, right? If we
So you can
had separate
create-
articles
Yes. you can
that were
create a-
simply, we're putting these monies aside.
Right.
But that also does that, how does that affect the tax rate? It will just, will
You
it be a
still
line
have-
You
item?
just add it to the total
Right.
cost.
Okay, I mean, I'm for that because of
It's a separate
transparency.
article.
It hasn't happened to us for so many years. We used to be able to do that because we'd have 50 or 75,000 bucks, but it hasn't happened in a long time in Marlboro now, so.
I think we should start having that conversation though, Dan, because we have it here all the time about how we wish we had more reserves because when things come up, they're needed. So it's not going to go anywhere, and it's pretty clear to the town that we're only going to use it from that reserve fund when we need it. So why not be transparent about it and just say we have a transportation fund, we have a future tuition fund,
Right.
and we start throwing things
Then
in
what
it.
can I just ask a logistical question?
Yeah.
If it goes directly into the fund, you know, raised through an article rather than through the budget, what's the spending procedure?
So does become a little more restrictive. It's
Right.
a committed fund balance versus just a regular fund balance, so it has to be used for whatever strategies the fund is set up for.
Isn't
So
it?
would we all have to vote on it every time we wanted to?
To use the money?
To use the
Yeah.
money? Okay.
Yes.
Question though, if it's in a line item and it's for high school, does it just stay there? And or if there's a surplus, you get to move it anywhere you want? Like, for example, rather than putting it in a fund.
Right, so, I'm gonna,
Yeah.
okay. So there's a couple of different ways. So there are towns like Stratton that add phantom students to their tuition count because that's their only move, right? They don't have any other way to build a cushion or create a fund balance. And then when it creates a surplus, then they move it into a reserve account. And then there is what you're talking about, which, you know, is another way to do it, is a separate article that says, you know, we want to move $200,000, or maybe it's $100,000 to the transportation fund, $100,000 to operational fund, and they vote on that separately, and then the money moves in.
Because we do have a capital improvements fund. And
Right.
we could just directly talk to the town too about the school and that it's in dire need. I think that that's the narrative we're going to have to sell in the future anyway, because we're going to have to go for the bond vote. So maybe we can do that.
And it's very transparent. It's
Yeah.
saying, you know, this is what we need the money for, and we're asking you to vote on it.
But then you can't use it if you get extra students, extra high schoolers.
That is correct. You
Right.
can't take it out of the capital improvement fund to pay for the high school. You will run a deficit and you'll have to pay for that, and that's in a set. So
In the
But
next
I'm
year.
saying that we do it for all three.
Yes, I
I'm
was
saying
gonna
we
say, you can
for
do
capital
all of it.
improvement, We do it for
Oh,
high
excellent, high
school,
school.
and we do it for transportation. All the things that come up as pains in the asses consecutively. Yeah.
So circling back to Lori's initial question of what would you like to see on the next budget, what I've heard you guys discuss is you started at $1.84. You looked at a sheet that got you to $1.86. That is the program that Marlboro offers. You're getting a gift of a higher yield and no excess spending threshold, which would have gotten you to 216. The difference between 216 and 186 is 30. And so if you split the difference, like Dan suggested, you're at $2.
I'm coming out the other side, and just hear me out. On the line items they're gonna see $1.99, and they're gonna see $1.63,
Yep.
which we could explain as COVID expenses. We got a lot of federal money that
Yeah.
allowed us to
Absolutely.
totally deflate that,
Totally.
and now we're back up to $2.
And I would show the two previous years.
Right.
Which was in the high 180s and 190s anyway.
They
We
were
were already
creeping up.
on the way to $2. We were already there.
But what
had-
we know we're buying is, stuff that's for next year. So I get it.
And we're bigger, yeah.
Yeah.
So what direction would the board like to give to Lori and Wayne?
I think
for the
Lori
next
convinced me
version?
to be at $2. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's better, or 199 or whatever. And the only trouble I have with the reserve is,
The
you
hand
know,
tying, yeah.
the what?
The hand tying.
Well, yeah, a little bit there, but it's also the optics of it in a way. Like, you know, it's transparent, I guess, but we're also, you know, we're saying, hey, hopefully we won't have to use this for what we're saying. We'll be able to move it over to a capital fund.
We're gonna have an Australian ballot. I feel like I'd like to see
You wanna
everybody
be able to
tick the box.
Explain the reserve
say
in all these places this year and say we want to put this money aside in case. Why not just put it in the
I
budget,
feel like we
in
could
the line
explain
item?
it. I feel like we could just say, hey, look, this year we had a $129,000 increase in high school students. We need to bank for that so that you guys, next year, don't see this giant increase. And we can actually.
But can't we just put that in the budget, or you're saying, like, why wouldn't we just put that in a line item? Why would we put that in a reserve?
I think it's because I
What's the
want people
advantage?
to see it, and it's kind of self-explanatory in a way.
I don't.
It wouldn't be to me. I'm
Yeah.
lost in the sauce here.
Yeah.
I'm like hanging on. I'm like, wow, these guys are incredible. So I would not say it's self-explanatory to the general public.
And I agree with that as well. I think it would be better to
mystifying.
just include it in the budget as we want to call it padding. We don't want to call it padding, but we want to say in case
It's called
these kids
responsible
move in.
budgeting.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Then, if there's money
Contingency
left at the end of the
planning.
year, then we ask the voters to
move it.
instead of having it revert to the taxpayers, which is what law requires, we ask the voters to say, we'd like to now establish funds with excess money that we came through the year with. So I would be with Jude on that one.
Yeah.
Can be done
The
either way.
transparent-
There's
yeah,
lots
what's
of- I said there's lots of different ways to do it.
Yeah, it just making it transparent. It's almost like, do you want to have the transparency be we're putting in a savings account, or are we investing and making sure that our budget is well funded and we will not be over next year? I think those, and I maybe it's
They're both
maybe it's too
valid
simple, but that's
narratives.
what I'm hearing, and I agree that both of them are very easy to be transparent. But most folks just want to invest in the school. So that's just my general thought. That's why Bill brought up the tuition. I'm thinking about, you know, one-time expenses to be able to take advantage of this, and being very transparent that this is an opportunity for us to be able to invest in our school and our future. So.
May I ask a question about your town? Does your town do special articles when you go to
Yeah.
vote?
We have, yeah.
Yeah, so the taxpayers are used to seeing special articles,
Yes.
not just the budget. Just curious.
They're not used to saying it for the school budget.
I still don't
but they're
understand though,
definitely
Wayne. I mean, I
Yeah.
understand you're saying I'm paying this for the next year, but to me, we're building in probably a surplus, but that's just gonna be used to lessen the impact of next year's, expenses. So.
Well, not necessarily. If we ask the voters to designate that surplus for specific reserve funds, then it doesn't just go into the next year's budget.
Yeah, what you're wanting to accomplish, we would accomplish at the end of next year.
Anyway.
With anything that we end up with. And our assumption is that we would end up with, we would not go over budget next year. We would be able to do things that we need to do, we'd be able to also be maneuverable and be able to shift, because we don't know what next year looks like for COVID. We didn't budget it for last year, and we have a lot of expenses that we're having to deal with right now. And luckily we have that reserve to be able to really help us with this piece. But I think that's what it is that we just wait till the end of the year and then we put it in,
Yeah.
as opposed to putting it in at the beginning of the year and being like, oh, well, maybe we should have actually did 180,000 instead of 200,000. So.
Okay. Do we want to have well, I guess we don't need a vote on it, but straw
No.
poll vote?
We have several more meetings coming along, so these are targets which
You
we
guys
really
know
appreciate you
what
asking
your-
for.
I have a target tax rate, and
Yeah.
I can put it all in the budget, and then if we decide differently, we can call it.
Great.
Yeah, but I think the areas you're looking at are high school.
Yep,
Paying
transportation.
the mobile classroom,
Yep.
and
Architecture.
transportation.
Yeah.
Capital
And-
improvement.
Capital.
Any questions for Lori? Any other items? We did our exec session at the beginning, so I don't hear any
Bill
other.
can go too, right?
Bill, you gotta stay here and help BCTV clean up.
So are we talking about adjourning the whole meeting then?
I'm talking, yeah, this is just a
So I just
beginning.
have a question. Did the item that we were texting about earlier in the week, the idea about a boundary conversation, did that not, I noticed that didn't make it onto the agenda.
No, I was thinking about for the regular meeting.
Thank you, just want to make
Because
sure.
I think people will be there too.
No, that'd be great. There was someone that said something about, we could talk about it
Okay,
tomorrow,
so-
so no worries.
Just a reminder, next meeting will be Zoom, not in the school. You weren't here when we had that conversation.
Oh.
Just because we're gonna be closer to a number and we can let people in and say this is what's going on before the break, and then we'll come back and reconvene after January, or in January.
And wreak havoc, is that what you said?
Reconvene
Oh.
in January.
We're wreaking havoc.
We're gonna wreak havoc at the next meeting, sorry. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved by Selena, Peter?
Second.
Seconded by Jeremy. All those in favor?
I
All right.
I like starting